All the Young Dudes by MsKingBean89, Chapter 124, 7th Year, Christmas Part 1. In a miserable twist of fate, the December 1977 full moon fell on Christmas Day. The Marauders all agreed to stay at Hogwarts for the duration, with a plan to travel back to the Potters on Boxing Day. Lily made them all promise that they would meet up as soon as possible in Diagon Alley. "It's the only place my parents will let me go by myself," she explained to Remus. "I wanted to come to the Potters' Chew, but they're protective and they haven't met James yet." "Why not invite James to yours?" Remus suggested. Lily bit her lip and shrugged. "It's just a bit tricky. Maybe for Easter break." It was a cheerless Christmas, really. James was missing Lily. Peter obviously wished he was at home, not stuck at school. Sirius was anxious and jittery whenever he and Remus were in the same room with someone else. And Remus himself was grumpy and irritable, waiting for the moon to take hold. They didn't do anything very Christmassy either, other than go down for lunch with the other students who had stayed. They had promised Mrs. Potter not to exchange gifts until they could all be together. "I feel awful," Remus sighed, as he wound a scarf around his neck, ready to start heading towards the shack ahead of his friends. "You lot should be home. I could have stayed by myself, or used your attic again, Prongs." "Don't be silly," James shook his head manfully. "I know how bad it is for you, in the attic, tied down like that. The shack's the best place. At least we can all run about a bit." And he was right, of course. They all needed a good run, and in the morning, Remus woke up and looked at his friends' rosy grinning faces and knew they all felt much better for it. They couldn't leave immediately, of course. Madame Pomfrey would not allow it. Remus was prescribed his usual morning of sleep, and he hoped that the other Marauders had taken the opportunity to do the same. When he woke up in the infirmary, Sirius was sitting in the chair next to him, grinning, 2 suitcases at his feet. "Ready when you are," he said, cheerfully, and Remus felt a pang of guilt again. Sirius needed to get home to the Potters just as much as James did. "Have you packed for me?" Remus sat up, blinking. "Blimey." "Of course I haven't," Sirius snorted. "Prongs did. I made sure he got the book on your bedside table there." Remus opened his mouth to speak, but Sirius raised a hand. "And the one under your pillow. Don't worry, Moony. Nothing gets past me." "Cheers," Remus smiled. "Just let me get dressed, then—" "Sure you'll be okay to flew?" Sirius asked, as Remus swiveled out of the bed, his bare feet landing on the cold flagstones. He felt a bit weak and woozy, but no worse than usual. He nodded. "Yeah, operated after a full moon once, remember?" "Okay, but you should stay if you don't feel up to it." "I will. Pass my jeans, will ya?" Sirius complied. Remus dressed, slowly, checking his body with every stretch and turn, making sure everything was working as it should be. He was starving hungry, but willing to wait for Mrs. Potter's cooking. "Where are the others?" Remus asked, bending now to tie his shoelaces. "Common room," Sirius replied. He held up his silver compact mirror. "I'm to let Prongs know when we're on our way to McGonagall's office. They'll meet us." "Great," Remus nodded. He stopped for a moment, dizzy again, and pretended to just be stretching. "Moony?" Remus began to tie his second shoe, concentrating very hard. "I'm going to tell Prongs over Christmas." "What?" He straightened up so suddenly that he had to grab Sirius's arm to stop from wobbling over. His head swam, and he blinked a few times while equilibrium restored itself. "Tell Prongs?" "Yeah." Sirius looked very pale, his eyes big. "If it's okay with you, I think I'd better." "Of course, yeah. I mean, wow. Why now?" Sirius shrugged. "Something's got to give. And I'm mental about you." Remus's face grew hot, and he looked away. He nudged Sirius's toe with his own. "Shut up." "Never," Sirius poked his tongue out. "So, it's okay?" "Yeah, of course it is. Will you let me know? When?" "Definitely. I want to pick the right time." "Okay. I'll go and get Pomfrey now. Shall I?" "Cheers." And with that, Sirius jumped up and disappeared behind the screen. Remus sat still for a few minutes, Stunned? Well, people could always surprise you. Boxing Day afternoon at the Potters was a welcome change of pace. Euphemia wanted to know all about Lily, and Fremont wanted to know how the new Gryffindor Quidditch lineup was working out. This led to a very long and involved argument between Peter, Sirius, James and his father, as they complained about the poor new chaser, something Erickson, and fretted over whether or not this would be the end to Gryffindor's 6-year winning streak. In the end, Remus and Euphemia abandoned them to this and went to the kitchen to help Gully with the washing up. Mrs. Potter pulled up a seat for Remus by the sink and said, "You just sit there, my love, and you can dry. Don't want you on your feet all evening, or you'll never get up tomorrow. And it sounds like the boys have a lot planned." They worked away in companionable silence for a while. Remus practiced several drying spells before giving up and just using a dishcloth. Maybe he would never be any good at domestic incantations. "Comes with practice," Euphemia smiled. Her face was soft in the twinkle of the fairy lights, and though she looked tired, and older than Remus had remembered her, she looked content and homely, just as a mother should look, in his mind. "Mrs. Potter?" "Yes, dear?" "You knew my dad, didn't you?" "Lyle? A little bit, but not well. Monty knew him better. They crossed paths at the ministry once or twice. And I believe they were both partial to a few Friday night pints in the leaky cauldron." She clucked her tongue indulgently. "What about Hope?" Euphemia set down the plate she had been about to hand over and looked down at him. He swallowed. "Hope Lupin? My mother. She was a muggle." "Yes, I know, dear. I only met her once." "But you met her?" He stared at James's mother, amazed. Why had it never occurred to him before? She pulled off her bright yellow marigolds and sat down in the chair beside him. "We were only introduced. We were both pregnant at the time. That's the only reason I remember. She was a lot younger than me and, as you say, a muggle. We moved in different circles, I suppose. Lyle was a very private man." "What was she like?" Remus asked, desperately. "Was she nice?" "Oh, Remus." Euphemia reached over and took his hand, which was cold from the dishes, and felt a bit too familiar. He didn't want to upset her, though, so he let her do it. "She was very nice, from what I remember. Mousy little thing, blonde hair, and a lovely smile. Very small, I remember thinking. Though, next to Lyle, anyone looked small. I don't remember what the occasion was, but we were both enormous. I remember her telling me she was expecting in March. I told her to get in touch if she needed anything, but I'm afraid she never did. Perhaps she didn't know how to do it." Remus looked down. If he had made it through his childhood unscathed, perhaps in time his mother might have made more friends. Perhaps she would have befriended Mrs. Potter, and perhaps they would have spent all their Christmases together. "I was given a letter," Remus said, slowly, "when I turned 17. She wrote it, Hope, before giving me away. She said in it, I might try to find her. Is that what you'd like?" "I don't know. Maybe she's changed her mind by now." "Remus," Euphemia said, very fiercely, "I can promise you she hasn't. If you want to look for your mother, then just give me the word. Monty can do it in a trice." Remus looked up, finally, and smiled. "Thank you." He went to bed early and was woken by Sirius creeping in under the covers. The house had grown quiet and it was very dark out. "Sorry," Sirius whispered, smelling faintly of brandy and warm all over as he wound his arms around Remus. "Didn't mean to wake you up." "Yeah, you did," Remus murmured sleepily. "Haven't told Prongs yet, then?" "Nah," Sirius shook his head against Remus's arm, burying his face under the duvet. "I thought tomorrow, after Diagon Alley, before dinner." "Okay," Remus sighed, closing his eyes and settling back to sleep. Just before he drifted off, he whispered, "You better set an alarm or something then, so you can get back to your own bed before—" But no, Sirius had fallen sound asleep. Tuesday, 27th December 1977. Come on, hurry up!" James was bellowing up the stairs as Remus searched for his woolly hat. "Calm down, you lunatic! We're almost ready!" Sirius yelled back from the landing, where he was rearranging his pattern in the full-length mirror. "No shouting and loud spores!" Euphemia called from the kitchen. "Can't find it. Did you pack it?" Remus huffed, hanging off his door frame. "I told you, I left the packing of prongs." "Oi, prongs! You forgot Mooney's hat, you bastard!" "I asked you to help me," James shouted back. "You said I had everything under control." "I assumed you did." "Sorry, Mooney." "It's okay, prongs," Remus joined in, a bit embarrassed. "I'll go without," he said. "It's not that cold." "Have mine," Sirius shrugged, tossing his head again, still eyeing himself in the mirror. "I don't want to muck up my hair anyway." "Accio hat!" Sirius's red woolen hat, emblazoned with a Gryffindor lion, came shooting out of the rubbish tip he called a bedroom, and Remus grabbed it from the air and rammed it down on his head. "Okay, let's go." "Finally!" James met them at the bottom of the stairs, where he had been waiting for a good half an hour now. "Where's Wormtail?" "Sent an owl. Doesn't feel like it, apparently." Grumpy git. "Yeah, well, for once I don't blame him for not wanting to flew to London on a winter's day just to see you and Evan snog," Sirius teased. "That's not all we do." James's ears turned red. "Anyway, if that's true, why are you and Mooney coming?" "I want some new books, and he's it for you," Remus shrugged. "Come on, let's go, shall we?" Remus remembered to keep his eyes and mouth closed this time. He'd like to think that he arrived in the fireplace of the leaky cauldron with some dignity, even if he had tripped over the cast-iron gate. Luckily, he stumbled straight into Lily's arms, as she had been anxiously awaiting their arrival. "Oof!" she yelped, staggering, but just about keeping upright. "Hiya, Remus." "Hi," he laughed, getting his own balance. "My hero." "Too late, prongs," Sirius said, brushing himself off as he stepped neatly over the grate. "You've lost to a better man already." "It was inevitable, I suppose," James grinned, following him out. Lily let go of Remus immediately and flung herself at James, who looked thrilled to bits. They managed to find a table to sit at the crowded pub and ordered 4 butterbeers. "Busy, isn't it?" Remus said, raising his voice over the din as he pushed through the throngs of shoppers with the drinks. "Sales," Lily said, casually. "Oxford Street's just as bad. I was there with Mum this morning." "Anyone here we know?" Sirius asked, raising his head to look about the faces. Not really." "Oh, I did see Frank earlier. Do you remember Frank Longbottom? He was head boy in our first year," Lily said, before ducking her head and focusing on a drink. And James's hand, which was on her hip and snaking slowly underneath her green wool jumper. Once they had finished their drinks, they were all keen to get out of the noisy, overworn pub and into the fresh air. The street, however, was just as packed. It seemed to Remus that the entire wizard population of Britain must be crammed into these few crooked streets, all wrapped in heavy winter robes, carrying bags and baskets and boxes, cheerily wishing each other Merry Christmas, or else rudely barging through the hustle and bustle to get to the shop they wanted. "Try to stay together," James threw over his shoulder at Sirius and Remus, before promptly disappearing into the throng with Lily. "Let's just do our shopping and find them later," Sirius huffed. "Put out. Did you say you wanted books?" "Yeah," Remus nodded, distracted. "Can you smell that?" "Smell what?" Sirius asked, pulling Remus's robe in the direction of flourishing blots. Remus followed, but sniffed the air again. The trouble was, it was so hard to describe a scent, even to Sirius, whose own canine attributes sometimes surfaced even when he was in human form. "I dunno," he said, lamely. "Just smells different than last time. The magic. It's probably just all these people." "You can smell magic?" "Oh, yeah, I can." "Bloody hell." The bookshop was manic, but Remus didn't mind. He would have been content to wander the shelves all day, row by row, picking through and reading blurbs and stroking covers. He was having the best afternoon he'd had in ages, until he was interrupted. Well, well, look who it is." Remus looked up and saw Snape standing only a few meters away. He reeked of silver, so Remus stayed back. "What do you want, Snivellis?" he tutted, pretending to be unconcerned, returning to the book he was looking at. "You and your little band of delinquents might think you own the school, loony Lupin," Severus tutted, "but you do not have any claim on Diagon Alley. I'm allowed to shop wherever I like." "Well, piss off and shop then," Remus shrugged, turning away. He was starting to feel sick, and he wanted Snape and whatever he was hiding under his robes gone. "You're in my way." Snape narrowed his cold black eyes. He began to advance on Remus, reaching over his shoulder for a book on potions. Remus's hands began to shake, so he put his book down and moved away, shoving his hands inside his pockets. Where was Sirius? "Feeling all right, loony?" Snape smiled maliciously. "What are you doing with that much silver on you, you freak?" Remus choked, leaning back on the bookcase behind him, his eyes watering. "One can't be too careful," Snape purred. "You get all sorts round here." "All right, Snivellis," Sirius's voice came from just behind them. Remus sighed with relief as Snape reeled back, looking as though he'd been caught stealing. Sirius stepped out from behind the bookcase, arms folded. "Get lost on the way to Nocturne Alley, did ya? Or maybe just in town for your annual hair wash?" "Fuck off, Black." "Oh, please, after you." Sirius made a sweeping bow, allowing Severus to stalk off, mumbling darkly to himself. Remus chuckled weakly. "Thanks," he said. "You okay?" Better not to worry him about the silver. Probably just Snape being his usual revolting self." "Fine," Remus smiled. "Come on, let's go and find the others, shall we?" "Don't you want to buy your books?" "Nah," Remus shook his head. "I just wanted to make a note of the names, see if Pince will order them into the school library for me. Free that way." "Fair enough. Come on then. Mad in here." They had to push most of their way outside, and once they were out, Remus needed a breather and had to lean against the wall in the alleyway beside the shop. "Are you sure you're okay?" Sirius asked, tugging at a lock of his long hair, anxiously. "Fine," Remus breathed, nodding again. The sickly feeling was receding now. He just needed a minute. "Just the moon, probably. Still tired." What did Snivellis want? "Oh, the usual nonsense." Remus screwed up his face. "I don't think he meant to bump into me." "What's Nocturne Alley?" "Over there," Sirius nodded, across the street to another alleyway, slightly wider than the one they were standing in, which clearly led to more shops. "It's where the dodgier types hang out. Dark wizards, banshees in disguise, vampires, that sort of thing." "Oh. And werewolves." Remus knew this instantly. There was a very faint scent. Now he knew what to look for. Someone who had been there recently. Not Livia. "James's dad was telling me they're planning a raid on some of the shops down there at the new year. Reckon they're stocking illegal supplies. Bet you anything it's where Snivellis snuck off to." Remus stared at Nocturne Alley for a while as he caught his breath. Whatever the strange new scent was, it was coming from there. He'd smelled something like it before, from Moody. Dark magic, burnt around the edges, charred flesh. He shivered. "Quality Quidditch supplies," he suggested. "If James is anywhere, he'll be there." "Good shout," Sirius nodded. "Let's go then." They left the shadowy alleyway and stepped out into the bright winter sunshine. It hadn't snowed this year, but it was still bitterly cold, and the sky was clear, making the air fresh and crisp with energy. As they crossed the road, slowly past the gaggles of witches shopping with their children, the wizards stopping to pass the time of day, and the house elves running errands for their masters, the energy seemed to change slightly. It made the hairs on Remus's neck stand up, like the arrival of a predator. He tensed and looked around. He caught sight of Lily and James looking at the latest broom in the window of Quality Quidditch supplies. He was about to turn and get Sirius's attention when it happened. Bang! The front of the leaky cauldron exploded into a plume of blood-red smoke, bricks and wood and glass flying out into the street. There was barely a microsecond of stunned silence before the screams started. Wails of pain, terror, and shock. The chaos around them seemed to expand and contract like a crashing wave. Crack, crack, crack. People were apparating around them. Many were leaving, but a few were arriving too. These were the ones that made something deep inside Remus want to start growling. Bang! Another shop further up the street exploded too. Then another, and get down! Sirius full body tackled Remus to the ground, and they both covered their faces as quality Quidditch supplies went up in smoke.